Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick update on the Sony A6300. Sony announced this camera today in New York at their press event, February 3rd, 2016. At 1000 US, you're looking at a body that looks pretty much identical to the A6000 that preceded it. However, we have a very big focus on, and I'm not trying to be cute, improved autofocus as well as UHD video capture, and that's without any pixel binning. So those are two enhancements that I think a lot of APS-C mirrorless customers that enjoy Sony's cameras were waiting for quite some time, really a year longer in my opinion than we should have had to. And we're definitely still paying a premium because at 1000 US for the body alone, it is expensive, although I do think that it is going to be a best-in-class product, much like the A6000 before it, and 1150 if you decide to get the kit glass. That is the 16 to 50 millimeter power zoom that's been on the market for a while now. Now, in terms of performance, you're wondering what the 4D focus is all about. Now, I wasn't at the event, but you should know this camera has 425 points of phase detection. So that is the most among any camera on the planet, basically. So Sony's bragging about that for good reason. And this is very similar to where I think many people found themselves with the original A6000. It broke some barriers for Sony and set a path for essentially a standard that would carry its way over to their full-frame E-mount cameras as well. And I very much expect the same thing to happen here, for those of you that are wondering. So we still have 11 frames per second continuous autofocus, 8 with live view. Also, they have high density focusing, which is yet another element of this 4D hybrid system. So instead of just calling it a hybrid focus system, which we've had now for several generations, combining phase and contrast autofocus points, Sony is at least saying that they've, I'm not going to say perfected it, but improved it to a degree where you aren't going to miss a shot. Of course, it'll be interesting to see how it actually performs in the real world. But you can see basically a graphic here describing exactly how the Bion's X processor handles that 0.05 world's fastest autofocus speed. And then in terms of the precision, that high density tracking that I was talking about before is basically Sony taking those, well, leveraging all of those autofocus points in the hybrid system to have accurate tracking, as opposed to, I think, where the A6000 came close but didn't hit things exactly on the head. Still does an unbelievable job for the price, but they wanted to improve upon it. And that's again why, although they may be calling this 4D focus, it sounds a lot like a refresh of the A6000. We're getting improved autofocus, and of course, even more important in some instances to me is finally UHD on board. And by the way, that UHD is Super 35, and as I mentioned earlier, no pixel binning, which means that it should make for some great video quality, even though we have no in-body image stabilization. And this new sensor that they're using, which is 24.2 megapixels, I believe, is slightly tweaked. They have utilized copper wiring, which they essentially are pointing to allows for better overall performance, efficiency. Battery life seems to be the same from what I've seen, 350 to 400 shots on a single charge. Still using the same battery for those of you that are curious. In terms of other things to note, the sensitivity has improved, or at least that's what Sony is promising, and I believe it because we are dealing with another generation here. And even though it may not be the revamp on the sensor that so many were looking for backlit, as well as maybe something with a higher megapixel count, even though I don't think that's necessary in this class, I still believe that what Sony's put out here, even albeit an expensive update, it's not that expensive when you think about where the A6000 began at retail. So people who are scoffing at the price right now may have short-term memory loss of where the A6000 began. But focusing on that 4K without the pixel binning, this to me is key. Sony is really a year late in delivering 4K, maybe even more so, in their APS-C bodies. And they definitely shifted focus to the full-frame business quite a bit. In fact, the 3 lenses that launched alongside this camera today were full-frame lenses, which was a little baffling because even though they are compatible with this camera, they are far from ideal. I mean, with regard to budget, the lenses were basically all roughly 2,000 and higher in terms of U.S. pricing, and just completely overkill for a camera like the A6300. But again, I am really excited to see what the UHD video out of this body looks like, how it performs. Also, the viewfinder has been improved. You've got 120 frames on that, 2.4 million dots, so definite improvement on the viewfinder. That means smoother motion, really just getting the EVF experience you would want. And then also you have 120 frame per second video capture as well. So not only do you have UHD, but also 120 frames per second. For those of you that are wondering, this is in XAVCS. High frame rate capability, as I just mentioned, that 120. So slow motion, something that so many people wanted, even though it may not be the speed they were looking for. This is still, I would say, a step in the right direction to have in an APS-C camera like this, which, by the way, the price is only going to go down with time, especially if you're going to use the A6000 as any sort of indication. And I didn't mention the color grading, but this has become a standard lately in the last generation on Sony cameras, even in the cybershot world. So it's nice to see S-Log3, the gamma curve there, so that you've got color grading at your fingertips, again, in a camera that's under 1,000 when you're talking about body only. And of course, there is a line in for a microphone, headphone jack, and you also have Sony's multi-port and video out. Beyond that, I mentioned the viewfinder. It is not, from what I understand, weather-proofed or weather-sealed, but it is dust and moisture resistant. Take that as you will. And when it comes to Wi-Fi and NFC, everything is still there. You're going to have access to the Play Memory Store. Again, whether or not you utilize it is completely up to you as a customer. But overall, I see this as a solid refresh. And I will say it again, when you look at that retail price, don't be in shock. I feel like this is really more of the successor to the A6000 and the NEX7, which is where the price is coming from, and also delivering the best of both worlds. But really where I think this leaves every customer right now who is interested in Sony's mirrorless business is with a very good idea of what we should expect from the A7R Mark III, A7S Mark III, whatever Sony's going to do in the full frame world down the road. You're going to see this autofocus system employed. That's exactly what Sony did with the A6000. They built off that autofocus system, so into their full frame lineup, utilized what they could in terms of the hybrid system really coming into its own and maturing. So I expect to see that. But otherwise, I am excited about this camera. That 4K video capture, the 5 times that 120 frames per second video capture, and most importantly, really, is of course the improved autofocus across the entire operation. Those are critical things that I think a lot of people are scoffing at right now, and I understand why. Until I get it in hand and really see the difference between it and the A6000 when it comes to autofocusing, really at the end of the day, the only true difference would be that this has that 0 pixel binning Super 35 UHD video capture, which for many users still is not even relevant in a still camera like this. For me, on the other hand, Sony really did push the envelope over the years with video quality when we were back in 1080p, so I felt they are incredibly late to the party when it comes to pushing it with UHD video here in a compact APS-C camera like the A6300. So that is where I wholeheartedly welcome 4K video capture. Otherwise, everything else is pretty much as you would expect. Again, identical to the A6000 in look and feel, but really all about that autofocus and the actual UHD capture. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.